It's a pretty good story. Mary and Joseph, the shepherds and the angels, the babe. It's a good story. It tells us about God coming as one who is vulnerable, as an infant. It's wonderful to be able to share it tonight with so many voices and so much talent, musical and verbal and otherwise. It's so good to be able to come and tell the story here, even if we hear the sirens outside, right? Which remind us that though this is a beautiful scene, the setting that it was set in was not easy. You know this. Mary and Joseph didn't have a baby in a barn because they thought it would be a great idea. They did it because their lives were turned upside down by a capricious government telling them to go from one part of the Middle East to another part of the Middle East. We know that story. At Christmas, we practice double vision. We see two things at once. We see this babe, and we know this is the God that created heaven and earth. We see the violence of the world that Jesus was born into, and we know that he came to offer a way and a word of hope and peace and nonviolence and justice and love. We see them both at the same time. We have double vision at Christmas. Lately, I've been reading the poetry of Nikki Giovanni, who passed away earlier this month. She was a great poet of the civil rights movement in this country. Her poetry was filled with the reality of the experience of what it is to be Black in the United States, and her poetry is also filled with an irrepressible joy and passion. I was reading a poem that she wrote after the shooting at Virginia Tech in 2007. She was a professor there. She had the shooter in one of her classes, and many of the victims as well. And so when she was asked to speak at their convocation, she said, "I was so sad. I sat down and I wrote what was important. And what was important was who we were, not what happened." She didn't pretend that terrible things hadn't happened, and her poem started out by saying, "We are sad today, and we will be sad for quite a while. We are embracing our mourning." But her poetry didn't leave them there. She went on to say, "We are strong enough to stand tall tearlessly. We are brave enough to bend to cry, and sad enough to know that we will laugh again. We are better than we think, and not quite what we want to be." Nikki Giovanni had double vision. She could look at the horror of that tragedy and also look at the beauty of what she knew to be the truth of Virginia Tech at the same time. So we talk a lot here on Sunday morning and sometimes on Christmas Eve about how there really are two Christmas stories told in the Gospels: the story about about Joseph and the story about the Magi. If you get those first letters mixed up, Joseph becomes Moses. So the story, the gospel about Joseph and about the Magi is in Matthew's gospel. The story about the angels and the shepherds and the manger and the stable, that's all in Luke's gospel. Tonight, I would like to lift up a third Christmas story that's told in the Gospels, and that's the story that's told in the Gospel of John. We'll read it in a few minutes. It's the last reading of tonight's service. And it starts out, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. all things came into being through the Word. And what has come into the being through the Word was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. John had double vision. John knew that sometimes the world is a hard and heavy night. And John knew that God had come as the Word, not just at the beginning of creation, but in this child, in this beginning, in Jesus, in the one who came to be God in flesh. John saw them both together. And I invite all of us, you, me, all of us here, this Christmas to practice double vision. It's not that there isn't plenty that's hard and worrisome in the world. And to pretend otherwise doesn't do us or the world any good, or God, for that matter. And to live only in that doesn't do us or the world or God any good. Tonight, I invite you to remember that no matter how heavy the night, the tiniest light pierces it. The night cannot do the same to the light. Tonight, I ask us to remember that even though the world in many places is a hot mess, and even though we, from time to time, certainly myself from time to time, are a hot mess, the double vision that we are called to have is that, okay, maybe it's a mess, definitely it's a mess, and Christ is born. God came, God wanted to come and be born right into the middle of this mess, right into the middle of me and you and all of us together. On Christmas Eve especially, and I hope all of Christmas season and all the year to come, we remember to trust the courage of love and the power of kindness and the steady redemption of grace. Because Christ is born. God is made flesh in us. The light comes into the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it.